Before we started, I wanted to talk generally about why we kind of provide infant toddler care. It can be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging. There's routines instead of schedules. Um, that you need more staff, which is more costs. You need more space because you need cribs and play and diaper warming and refrigerators and all of this kind of stuff. So it can be difficult to accommodate infants. But there's a real community need both nationwide and within California for reliable quality care for infants and toddlers. So within California state, there's almost 300,000 children with dual working parents or single working mothers with some kind of need for infant child care. And so within the United States, that number's in the millions. And it costs parents quite a lot of money to pay for this because it costs us a lot of money to run these types of programs. It's less for in-home programs, which is fantastic, but a lot of times FCC homes can be unlicensed or unregulated, and that's also an issue within our field. So for all of our development, we're looking through the prism of developmentally appropriate care. And then for our infants and toddlers, we're adding that with relationship-based and routine-based care. So we know for a fact, science has proved that infants and toddlers are learning and growing, and they're learning and growing through their relationships with other people and other adults and other children. So they have a really strong need to bond with a few caregivers in their lives. This includes the people at home, their family, and it also includes the adult caregivers in their lives who are providing for their routines and helping them learn and grow on a daily basis. Typically, I link or I provide a video at the beginning of my PowerPoints, but today I've linked a webinar from the Program for Infant and Toddler Care, and this is from West Ed, which is a California state kind of training program. And this, some of these programs do have a cost associated with them, and some of them do not. So I have linked to a webinar that's free. Typically after they provide their webinars, they also archive them so you can go back and listen to them at any time. But this is a good resource that if you work with infant and toddlers or you want to work with them or you're planning on operating a program that has an infant and toddler component, then you're really going to want to be aware of this state program. So here's some information on the ratios for infants and toddlers, depending on the age group, depending on the teacher, depending on if there's an aide. So it really changes, and I've tried to kind of organize it a bit under the idea Title 22, which is nonprofit community care licensing, or it's a for-profit or a faith-based, anything like that. And then our Title 5, which is more of the state-funded and Head Start. I haven't linked to the military requirements because they are license exempt, but I would probably say that they are in between Title 22 and Title 5. They don't exceed the Title 22, but they're not typically as low as the Title 5. I'm going to link a PDF from our Palomar Child Development Department website. It's called California Community Care Licensing Qualifications and Ratio Information. It goes over director qualifications, teacher aides, and then ratio informations. And it's just a one sheet. It's really important to have this because it goes over all of our age groups, and then also what your teachers might need to have as far as qualifications, because these do change quite a bit. I would also, if I would link on that page, it links towards the community care licensing website, which has all of these licensing requirements, which also includes information for if you do exceed ratios and combining groups in the AM and PM, and more information about ratios. So when we talk about supervision of infants and toddlers, we're really looking at our routine-based care, which is diaper changing, toileting, fixing bottles or breast milk, preparing them, storing them, feeding babies, cleaning up babies, all those types of things. And so that's the routine, and that's a significant chunk of your day. But you also have to be supervising infants because while you're taking care of the routine of one infant and toddler, another infant and toddler might be engaged in some kind of active exploration or quiet play or sleeping. So when people talk about their Class A violations for licensing, it's typically because the supervision component wasn't there, especially while taking care of some kind of routine, either bathrooms or toileting or diapering or feeding. So I really wanted to talk about coming towards your supervision from a proactive place of setting your environment up for success, and then being able to train the staff in how you set up this environment, and then what your expectations are as far as vigilant supervision. So when we talk about space planning, we're actually going to have a component of this in our online assignment where you guys get to come up with kind of your perfect classroom, because there are some newer programs that have half walls, so that supervision, it's very much an open concept, and it's much more easy to do, and it really facilitates learning and routine-based care. But you also need to be aware of where you put your cribs, where do you put your infant exploration space, and then some of us don't have that great of a space. I've worked in an infant toddler program that was a old house that we had been gifted, and so we were able to turn it into an infant and toddler space, and we had some serious issues with space planning, and we used those corner convex mirrors all the time. We had larger mirrors so that if I was doing a diaper changing in a little alcove area, I could also use my mirrors in order to supervise a crib or a active exploration space. And then I wanted to bring up the idea of your substitutes in a classroom if a teacher's on vacation or sick, and then also your floats who come in and do breaks. When regular staff is in the room, they need to be aware of, and they probably should have been included in making the supervision rules and planning the environment, because they're the regular staff in that classroom, and they kind of know the issues with, preparing a bottle while also supervising. But the people who do come into your room on an as needed basis are now part of our relationship-based care. So they're taking excellent care of our infants and toddlers, and they're also engaging in our routine-based care while supervising. So they need to be made aware of our supervision program, policies, and procedures. So when we look at training staff, today we're just going to be talking about infant and toddler, but we'll be talking about the other age groups in their own PowerPoints. What do you think a newly hired teacher who is going to be working with infants, toddlers, or a combination of both need to know? And this would include, but not be limited to, like our diaper changing procedures, and then also what other health and safety issues might happen in a classroom, like when do you wear gloves, how do you feed babies, how do you warm bottles, how do you label breast milk. And then also your exclusion policy for sick children. When can they stay and when do they need to go? And then our observing children policy. So how do we document and assess how children learn? And then how do we communicate that with parents? And then I always think it's a good idea to get your employee handbook out of the way. Their rights as an employee, your rights as an employer, and then your break time shifts, the length that you're working, the contract that you have with them, the pay rate that they're going to have. That's all really good to get out of the way. Any legalities like that before they actually begin working for you. I'm chuckling a little bit because I've seen these things not happen, and they've also happened to me where I just kind of begin work and then we talk about it at a later time. So I think it's always important to get those kind of legalities out of the way so that you're really upfront with how much you're paying, how long they're going to be working, what their shift length will be, and then their rights as far as when they get lunches and breaks. So your weekly assignment is really just in bullet form to give me an idea of a training program that you would want to do for an infant or toddler teacher. What policies or information do you think she would need to know or he would need to know before working in your classroom? So you're not writing the policies and giving it to me. You're just in bullet form explaining what you would want to tell a teacher before his or her first day in your classroom. So with our environment and space planning, I've talked a little bit about this, but it can be a challenge within an infant space because it's routine-based, it's not schedule-based. So a child might have a completely different eating and sleeping routine compared to another child, and we have to be able to accommodate that, 12 to 13 hours a day that our center is open. So it needs to be set up for sleeping, playing, eating, and changing diapers at all times from opening to closing. And then outdoor time should be available daily, and depending on the environment that you have, it could be a buggy walk or laying on a blanket in a shaded area under a tree or a pop-up tent. A dedicated space is really nice, and in some programs that we've just had a little gated area off the back with some nice fake grass or real grass and blankets and stuff like that. But a lot of times we have a combined space for our toddlers and infants, and the preference is given to the toddlers who need more active exploration. But we can use that space during nap time or to go on a buggy or stroller walk, but it should be made available even for infants. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of play. So with this classroom, it's going to be quiet and active. Even for toddlers, they're going to need to take naps, or they're going to need to have some quieter circle time, maybe before they eat. And then, like I said, it's set up so that our programs are responsive and responsive caregiving oriented, meaning that we meet the needs of all the infants and toddlers in our program, and then whatever their routines are throughout the day. And then really, a 6-week-old, their need to play is going to look very different than a 10-month-old who can be in the same classroom. So a 10-month-old might need to actively crawl around the room. They need a safe, maybe padded place to pull to stand or to try to stand independently, whereas a 6-week-old is really going to need a quieter place on a blanket in order to engage in like supervised tummy time, or trying to reach for their toes, or batting at toys, trying to hold rattles, that type of stuff. In some of my classrooms, I've tried to kind of separate so that there would be a smaller baby area where they can work on tummy time and like quiet, cooing, babbling interactions. And then maybe on the other side of a shelf or a low wall where you still have supervision, we can work on older infants crawling, standing, taking some first steps. In one classroom, we had a large kind of industrial fish tank, and that kind of separated the play areas. So you could kind of see through you could very easily see through the fish tank, but it kind of separated two different types of play. Touched about routine-based care, but the ideal, and that's what this quote is going to go over and what this video is about, is it's the ideal for a caregiver to use feeding, napping, and toileting, or our diapering routines as opportunities to build a close personal relationship with each child while attending to the child's individual physical, emotional, and developmental needs. And this comes from a guide to routines, which is a PDF that I've put on Canvas, and it's from the state of California. And it's really important reading if you want to have an infant component to your program. And I've linked to the It's Not Just Routine video. There's a part 1 and a part 2. And any infant toddler staff that I had, I actually had them watch part of these videos because it shows some diaper changing, and then also talks about how important it is to establish relationship-based care while you're engaging in routines. If you were just looking at routines as something to get through, then your day would be something to just get through, because you are changing hundreds of diapers on a weekly basis, and this is for infants and toddlers. You're feeding bottles all day long, or you're helping toddlers, work on those forking skills. So the majority of your day is actually routine based, and so there needs to be relationships and quality relationships established within our routines. So some health issues that affect our infant and toddler age groups: preparation of bottles. First of all, how they're warmed in a bottle warmer, in a crock pot, and even if the child wants them warmed, my infant, well, she's not she's not an infant anymore. She's 1 and we're phasing out bottles. She never wanted a bottle warm. She would take it icy cold over warmed any day of the week. So knowing what your infants want. And then how do you supervise your infants while you're doing it? That comes back to our space planning that we had talked about before. If you're in a side room, you might need to have some convex mirrors or additional staff in the room so that you can supervise while you're also warming a bottle. And then I encourage all programs to be breastfeeding friendly by having a chair so that breastfeeding mothers can come nurse on their lunch breaks. And then policies and procedures and then training for staff on preparing breast milk, defrosting breast milk, and then labeling it as well. They make some like rubber bracelets, like the Live Strong bracelets that you can actually put on diapers that say breast milk. And I think that's really important because obviously all bottles are labeled with the child's name, how many ounces are in it, and then when it was prepared or defrosted, and this should be done by the parents before they come into your program. But a lot of times, because it is a bodily fluid, you're going to want to take an additional step to have the breast milk bottles or bags or however it's stored be labeled as well, because you wouldn't want to feed a formula-fed infant somebody else's breast milk, which is a bodily fluid of another woman. So taking those additional steps as well as far as differentiating bottles can be good for your program. And then diaper changing and hand washing procedures are posted in each area. This reminds the teachers and how to change a diaper or how to take off their gloves, when to put their gloves on within the steps of the diaper changing. And then parents typically aren't changing the diapers of their children within your classroom. The teacher should be offering to do that. But if a parent ever was to change their child's diaper, it would have some pictures to show them how to do it. And then also hand washing, because you are washing your hands consistently throughout the day before you prepare bottles, before you give a bottle, but after you change a diaper, that type of stuff, you're washing your hands consistently throughout the day. So this is reminding you when to do it, and then also pictures on how well to wash your hands. And then that kind of reinforces to the parents that we take health seriously within the classroom. When we talk about health, I wanted to put a couple things in as far as cleaning rooms and toys. The first would be that infants need to be allowed to mouth toys. That's an oral motor exploration. It's an early part of development. That's how they explore and negotiate the world around them. So that needs to be a part of the program. And especially children are with us for quite a while. If they are teething, then they're going to need to teeth as well. And that's kind of why I put this picture of this drooly little baby teething on some stuff. And I put this in because I have dealt with infant teachers before who didn't think that children should be allowed to put things in their mouth. It's not something that I encourage, but it is a part of oral motor development and early development. And so teachers maybe who are a little bit more established might need to have some training in how infants develop and how the brains develop early on in order to kind of support this development within the classrooms. So then you as a director, you obviously can't have children just, drooling all over everything and nothing gets cleaned. So most programs already have some kind of idea of a dirty toy bin where an infant explores a toy with their hands and mouth, and then it's placed in a labeled bin and it needs to be, cleaned at a later point. And this allows them to explore without cross-contamination. And then I've also kind of highlighted this NIAC cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting frequency table, which is also on Canvas. So this talks about the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, when you do it, how you do it, and then how you do it for different age groups. Most of you have probably already seen this, but I did want to link it and put it on Canvas for anybody who's maybe new to the infant toddler or new to kind of running centers. This is a very necessary table that kind of explains to you how you keep things clean. So when talking about communicating with families, best practice is for it to be written communication and verbal communication. And for our infants and toddlers, this becomes more of record keeping. So it's a place where a parent informs the teachers of the events preceding drop-off, what time they woke up, when they nursed, and then vice versa when a teacher communicates the routines of the day, how many soiled diapers the child had, how many ounces of bottle, how potty training is going, what kind of food they had for lunch. And most programs are going to do this, not only in our infant and toddler period, our school age, and then our preschool will also do some kind of written and verbal communication. But for infants and toddlers, it takes on more urgency because it is daily and there's a lot more information to cover throughout the day. So really you need to train your teachers on how to keep this record keeping. After a child soils their diapers, writing it down in the moment, because going back at lunchtime or something like that, you often forget what happened, especially if you have you're following ratios, so you maybe only have 3 or 4 infants in your room, but if you have a couple different teachers with different groups, it can be a little bit more confusing. And then you also want to communicate with parents what happened during the day. So the practical and physical needs, but also the highlights and concerns. So the teacher's communicating if they need diapers, how much they ate, any fun things that happened, if they think the child was clingy and might be teething. So I've included a PDF on Canvas, and this is an example of a written communication that you would engage in with families for our infants and toddlers. So I wanted to touch a little bit about inclusion of our children with special needs, and then how that kind of piggybacks with communicating with their parents. So a child who's come to you with a known delay or need for intervention, you're going to work to make adaptations possible, and it doesn't need to be difficult or expensive. It's just intentional and having a plan of action that you come up with the parents. And I did also want to bring up the idea that the parents don't have to show you the IEP, and maybe they only want to show you part of the IEP. So if the IEP had a goal that was going to be specific to your goals within your ECE program, then you might want to see that. So if it was for a 3-year-old talking about articulation, or for an infant talking about positioning, you're going to need to see those IFSP or IEP goals. But they don't need to show you the rest of it, and a lot of it is just kind of words and stuff like that. So, and the parents only need to show you parts of it. And so just be aware when asking for paperwork what you're asking for. And then also the idea of you as a director being responsive to your caregivers. So you're asking your caregivers to be responsive to the child, and now you need to be responsive to the caregiver. So if the training really is important at this point. If a caregiver had concerns about a child, you would want those to be well observed and documented, and you wouldn't want it to go home in just a regular conversation with the parents. So, you wouldn't ever want a caregiver to say, hey, I think your kid's blind, or I think they have autism. First of all, we're not doctors. We can't diagnose that. And that's not the way that you tell a parent that you have concerns. So you telling your teachers what you think is going to be really important, especially for our infants. And that's why I bring it up so early on is, I have 6-year-olds, and I remember their first year as a new mom feeling very overwhelmed. And so somebody coming at me and telling me there's something wrong with your child. And that's probably not how most people go about it, but that's how a mom can feel. That can be really overwhelming. So I wanted to just touch about how and ways that you can talk to parents about this type of stuff. It's best to have a meeting after the caregiver has documented why they have concerns, and then you're going to sit down and you're going to meet, and you're just going to gently explore what your concerns are. So if a child's 6 months old and if a child's 12 months old and they're not crawling, if they're over 18 months old and they're not walking, then those are kind of concerns that you would generally bring up, and you can ask the parent maybe to talk about the pediatrician, because that's typically, once you've shown some concerns in a gentle way, where you want the parent to explore why developmental milestones and guidelines haven't been met, then the pediatrician is then going to refer to First 5, Regional Center for Early Intervention, or maybe to a physical therapist or occupational therapist or speech therapist for added interventions. So just to kind of recap, it's easy to make adaptations when a child comes to you with a known special need or IFSP. But when they don't and you're noticing some things, the best thing to do is be responsive to your caregiver who has those concerns, allow them to make some observations and documentations of their concerns, and then you as the director speaking with the parent. And then you can include the teacher as well, obviously. But bringing it up in a gently way, some next steps as far as talking to the pediatrician about maybe getting some evaluations done or seeing if there's some added services that could help. So when we're looking at our infant and toddler components of programs, it can be a struggle. It can seem daunting at times because we're keeping children happy, we're keeping them healthy, and we're keeping them safe. So those are three things. And it can be difficult. Supervised is the biggest part because that's going to keep them safe. And as a manager or director, we need to have policies and procedures in place to support the healthy, happy, and safe. And then also to realize that it's a collaboration between family and teachers to support children's active learning. And that's why I've talked a lot about training of staff today, because a well-trained, responsive caregiver is going to provide that routine-based care, which supports infants and supports their kind of natural inclination for active exploration.